Welcome back to this week's edition of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. This week we have Eric Garcia, writer, novelist, creator of Netflix's Kaleidoscope series, which is its 8-episode run is on now. Debuted on the first of this year. Eric, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Very good. Very good. Glad to have you on.
Glad to be here.
So why don't, because I've seen you've been pretty good with campaigning to get the word out about Kaleidoscope, but I'm sure you've got this pretty well down now. Give us Kaleidoscope in your words, and
Sure.
and and feel free to include the part about how to view it.
Yes, of course. Kaleidoscope is, as you pointed out, an 8-part series that came out January 1st on Netflix. And it is a show that spans 25 years across the causes and planning and execution and fallout of a giant heist in New York City and environs. As you're pointing out, the way how to view it is because the show is designed to be watched in basically any order. So rather than have episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, our episodes are yellow, green, orange, violet, that sort of thing. There are 7 quote unquote colored episodes, which all take place around the heist. So one of them is 24 years before the heist. One of them is 1 year after the heist. One of them is 6 weeks before the heist. You can bounce back and forth. And once you've watched all of these episodes, you can then continue to the final episode, the only one that is sort of meant to be last in the order, though we'll get to that, I'm sure, which is White, which is the heist itself, which once you watch that sort of opens up new pieces of information and lets you in on different things that you may not have known before. So that's the short version of Kaleidoscope.
Right. Yeah. So I've seen you explain that there's a way to watch it chronologically if you like, but part of the appeal, and you set it up this way, and Netflix has done it. I had to have figured out some sort of algorithm where everybody, except for White, which is always going to be the last episode, everybody gets a different episode in a different order. So there's like something like 5,000 combinations. You could watch it.
Exactly. If you were to go into it yourself, which literally millions of people have done, you could choose any of, it's essentially 5,040 orders, right? 7 factorial. The way Netflix does it is they send there are a certain number of orders that they put out. So theoretically, your order will be different from mine, will be different from my neighbors. There are a finite amount of orders. The internet has also figured this out. I didn't really know what the finite amount was. I'm still not entirely sure what that finite amount is, but it is a finite amount based on just technologically what they were able to do. Mm-hmm. But that said, so a lot of people will just hit play and go in the order that Netflix gives you, which is great because it does different things, bounces around, whatever. Some people like to go chronologically. Stephen King apparently wanted to go chronologically. Chronologically, who am I to argue with Stephen King?
Right.
And I don't have a preference. Everybody asks, like, do you have a favorite?
Yeah.
And I really don't. I think they're all valid. I think here's the thing I've definitely learned over the last, because we're talking now and we're about 3 weeks into the release, right? It's the 23rd. And over the last 3 weeks, I have come to the belief that there are better orders depending on who you are as a person and what your personality type is. If you're someone who really likes to be like thrown into something in the deep end and go like, you know what, I can figure this out and swim for a little bit, then you might want to start with, I use Red as an example. Red is very much an episode where if that's the first one you like, you're just like, I don't exactly know where I am, but that's how it was designed to be. If you're somebody who needs to do chronologically, there's a way to do that. If you're somebody who's like, I want to establish myself and then bounce, it just depends on your personality type.
Right.
The problem is I don't know everybody's personality type. So I can recommend to my friends, but I can't just recommend to like, what's the best order? I don't know,
Yeah. Well, I think the fascinating idea and what got me interested in to begin with, besides the fact that Giancarlo Esposito is the lead in it, that was what the initial thing. And I'd known your stuff, that you had done some of your novels that had been turned into films and stuff like that.
Yep.
I like the appeal of it being like a Spotify playlist, like I have, where it's just I've got nearly 10,000 songs on this playlist, and literally anything. Yeah, they only let you go up to 10,000, so I'm constantly kicking things off to add new things on. Sometimes I add whole albums, and I have to go back and say, well, okay, not that track, not that, so I can put new stuff on, because life is always a ever learning, thing. But so yeah, it's like listening to music on shuffle.
Yeah, which is something. It's funny you bring that up, because so I'm a child of the 80s, and by the time I was like really finding my own music, it was the late 80s, early 90s, right?
Sounds like me, yeah.
Yeah, like that's when I started getting, that's when I got like deeply into Queen and Floyd, and then started finding and then also sort of the quote unquote modern alt stuff like REM, right? And so I had one of those. Do you remember those 5-disc changers where it was like you had 5 CDs?
Yeah, that was considered a big deal.
Oh, that was a big deal. No, that was save up my money kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
And so what my favorite thing to do was put it on Ultimate Shuffle, which was 5 CDs, and it would shuffle. You could have CD4 track 3, and then it would go to CD2 track 8, and I would do exactly what you're saying in terms of playlists, and I would be like, okay, these 5 CDs, this is going to be my evening. And somehow between it, and then I was like, but let it be random, and then we'll find what goes. And I think, still coming back, narratively, I think that was sort of the goal with Kaleidoscope, is like find a way to keep it contained, to keep it to this story, right? But we're telling the story about these characters, and the way in which you do it, that night of 5 CD shuffling is going to be different each time. And it's going to give you a different feel each time. And my goal is that depending on how you watch it and what your shuffle is going to be different from mine. And we're going to believe different things about the characters. We're going to have different feelings towards the characters. If you were to watch Orange first, for example, Orange focuses heavily on our FBI agent. I believe you have a predisposition now towards that character that you would not if you watched another one first. Watch another one first, you're probably like, I don't know how I feel about her. If you watch Orange, you're like, you know what? Yeah, I get her. Same thing with Bob and Pink. People are, Bob is sort of our aggressive, to say the least. In a way, sort of a villain, sort of not. But Pink is the episode where I think you sort of understand his love for his wife, and I think that's a saving grace. I think you watch Pink first, though it's the last chronological one, you might have a different view on him. So anyway.
Yeah, I forget the color I started with, but it was the prison episode.
Green.
Okay, so green. So I did green, and it went into yellow, and then it went into violet, and then orange is where I stopped for now. I'm gonna probably burn through that in the next couple of days. But I like that setup, actually. I for me, that kind of works. It's kind of, just that was a pretty good. That's as good of a starting place as any for me to start. Because it's like you get a feel for. It's primarily 2 characters, and also let's just stop for a minute and just say thank you for having Richard Nassir in it as the doctor. He's kind of been, in my radar, he's been kind of quiet, but he used to be a real one of those dependable character actors that would pop up in everything.
So much from the time I was a kid too, right? Like the shows in the 70s and 80s, like Richard was always there. And so that was a situation where we had this character. He's really only in that episode, right? He's just mean. And we saw a number of actors for it, and no. And then Julie, our casting director, said, I think Richard's available. I was like, he's not going to do this. She's like, I think he'd do this. He doesn't live that far. Like, he really loves the this kind of thing, and sent him the script, and he loved it. And he was so involved and so gracious and so good just about talking about character, just getting deeply into who this guy was, figuring out his look. He had just shaved his head. I don't know if it was to match me, but he had just shaved his head. So we're like, oh, that's perfect. He's I'm glad you pointed that out, because I really love him.
Like I said, I haven't seen him in a lot lately. In fact, I was reading a biography on Michael Cimino, and I've seen Heaven's Gate 3 different times in its 2.5-hour version.
Yeah.
And I just finally found out that Amazon is showing the 3-hour 40-minute cut.
Oh my God.
Which is on the Criterion disc, which I don't have yet. So I'm kind of going through that, and he's in Heaven's Gate. There's a lot of people in Heaven's Gate. In fact, Willem Dafoe famously is in Heaven's Gate. He was actually fired by Cimino for talking, but you still see him in a scene. And then Richard Masur is in there too as a train, not amazing. A conductor, but like a train, guy. I don't.
I'll have to check it out. I will have to watch.
Yeah, he's in the beginning of the movie. He's not in it like a ton, but he's got a fascinating, I think, Irish accent. That's really cool. But that's a fascinating movie. Fascinating story.
They have a Heaven Gate story. I'm sure you've read. What the hell's the name of the book? Which is essentially the book about how Heaven's Gate.
The final cut, which is by one of the co-heads of the studio, which the biographer of Cimino kind of goes in and says the guy puts a lot of false stuff in there.
No doubt.
He talks about the fact that United Artists were bankrupt, which is a total falsehood. It could have weathered the storm, but they had an offer to sell and they sold it. It was like Transamerica owned it at the time, and they're like, "Well, we'll just get rid of it. Who cares?"
I mean, I think that's what's interesting from you're always dealing with art versus commerce, and I think when they look at something like that, they do the same thing, right? I mean, you can look now at all of these decisions that HBO Max, for example, is doing, right? Last 6 months to start taking things off their service, cancel Batgirl, right? All these things, and it's literally a financial move. And so you go, all right, well, what are we in the business of making? Which is, something we all deal with, something we dealt with on this too. And, you try to do something interesting and different. And sometimes that's hard, I'm sure Cimino was up against a lot of people who did not necessarily understand the vision. So
yeah. Well, he was an interesting character. I'm pretty much at the point where it's like towards the latter part of his life where he's not working anymore, and it's just kind of sad, but because it was a guy basically stuck in his house for the last 20 or so years of his life.
Wow.
Yeah. But getting back to your show, like I said, I'm liking it so far. What I saw, I think, worked perfectly for me. I don't know how. It's I don't feel like I'm lost. I don't feel like I don't know what's going on. But you said something in an interview I read where you said that if you do go back and watch it in, say, a different order, or say you watch the whole thing and then you decide to watch it chronologically, you'll see hints of things that maybe you didn't see on the first one because you're just watching. And I like the idea of not passively watching, but relaxing watching, where I'm paying attention, but I'm not one of those guys that's going to see every sign, unless they're hitting me over the head with it. Like I'm not going to see every character motivation or every tick. And you even put, you said you put in a line from Spin Doctors, the Two Princes song, somewhere in the show, which I know I'm never going to catch it.
It wasn't even me. That was my writer's room. That was a thing that they did. Well, look, there are a number of ways I think that you can watch the show. You can be fully passive and just be like, I want to watch a show that's just like a heist thing. Totally cool. Great. Hopefully people like that. Then there's the version you're talking about where you're watching it and you're like, all right, I'm picking up on some of these themes and picking up a couple things here, whatever. And then there's the deep, get all the insane. I mean, we have stuff in there that's just ridiculous that nobody's going to find. People actually, and maybe I'm not surprised, it's the internet. People have found a lot of stuff. We have a painting in pink that's just in frame for 3 seconds. And it is a metaphor / simile visual cue to a painting that also goes back to a story from the Bible that has to do with our characters. It's so insane.
Yeah.
Somebody figured it out online.
Yeah. Well, how does stuff like that work? Do you write it in there, or is it like the art director or set director, decorator? Yeah. How does it go? I mean, where does this stuff come from?
It's a combo. There's a lot of stuff that was written in there from the original scripts and from the writer's room. Some stuff we put in there. And then there's a lot that, we just did once we were up in either in prep. So I have really a number of amazing HODs. So Michael Bricker is my production designer. Michael Bricker had done stuff like he did, what did he get the Emmy for? The first thing he did, Russian Doll, right? He literally his first production design was for Russian Doll, and all he did was win the Emmy. But Michael's, I've said this before, I'll say it again, I think he's a genius. I don't use that word lightly. And so he threw down, he's the one who created the sets for SLS. I mean, all of it, anything in this production design. So that's a lot of the stuff that's in there comes from these conversations with Michael. Similarly, Jenny Gehring, who's our costume designer, who's amazing. There's stuff in the costume that comes in there. Max Sherwood, who's props. Max threw down really hard with this concept. He got really geeked out by it. And that's kind of what I looked for, is just like really excited nerds like myself to just go in and just be like, how can we connect all of these things? So the painting, for example, that was a thing that actually Rose and I had talked about. Rose, who plays Judy, because the painting involves Judy, and she mentioned it offhand, and I said, wait, I think we can get that in there. But that was just through conversations. You know, you're just, as a showrunner, I'm just talking to people constantly. That's all my job is like talk, make decision, talk. And so, you know, you bring everybody in. I pointed out before, Richard Mazer, like, you know, some of that was about like, how can we get his costume thing in there? How can we make his car match him, you know, as we go and we deal with the props in the cars. So it's a combo of things. And it's everything from the big stuff to the really teeny, stupid things that literally nobody will ever find unless I point to the frame where they need to find, you know. But those are the things that you could find when you look back, but you'll see when you finish the White episode, and try to make sure you watch the White episode last. Not everybody does, because Netflix was not super clear about that. That was the only thing they were not super clear about when it came to explaining how to watch the show. So some people are watching the White episode, whatever, which, hey, fair enough. It's on their thing. They can do what they like. That wasn't designed that way. It was designed for the White to be last, because White is sort of a series of answers in a way to all these questions that come up when you watch it. But, you know, all the colored ones have questions and answers that are there for you to see once you've seen everything, and then can go, like you said, oh, I didn't know this was a clue. I was just watching this passively. This was actually a clue. So there's a certain amount of that, you know, as well.
That's cool. Well, you first had the idea, you said I've seen you write in 2014, where it was just a basic idea. It was just, you know, a heist film in different order.
It wasn't even heist. It was actually, it's funny. I found the thing. I thought it was 2014. Turns out it was late 2013. I found the email, digital hoarder, that was sent to a friend of mine who's a director. And it was really just structural. It was structural before I'd even put the heist on. It was just, I thought it was a way to do a story surrounding a central event. And you should be able to watch all different aspects and be able to understand it and be able to get different things depending on where you came in. It's always been an exercise sort of in character and plot, where the idea is that we cede control of things that as writers we usually control back to the audience. And we have to give up our tricks that we use. Oh, I'm going to build tension here by doing whatever between this episode and this. I don't know, can't do that anymore. So how do you do it? It's like a challenge more than anything else, you know?
Yeah, well, you're also talking about a time period that's kind of at the beginning of the binge watching age. I recall when I had cable, I had HBO, and they were the first, I think they were pretty much the first group or whatever to put out all of its series available on demand. If you had HBO, you could go in, and HBO had a standalone like section. You could go in and watch all the Sopranos or what have you. And then it wasn't until, for me, the summer of 2012, when I had been hearing so much about Breaking Bad, that I just sat there and watched like the first 3 or whatever seasons were available, you know, and I was like, oh my God, this show's amazing. And I think that's how a lot of people got into that show. So Netflix was a big game changer in that frame, and now they've gone on to be, you know, a whole different company. I mean, he went from just sending out DVDs to just being a place where they would just, they would take all this stuff in and say, here it is, and then they started, making stuff. And
I mean, until House of Cards, House of Games.
That seems right.
House of Cards, that which was their first one. They were, I remember watching a lot of documentaries, foreign films. That's what I watched streaming once, because I did the same thing with the DVDs, except I would like never return the DVDs. I would just have the same 3 fucking DVDs in my house. But once the streaming stuff started, like I remember there was one called I Like Killing Flies. There are just certain ones that I just got really into, and I was like, this is brilliant. And I happened to have, I had Verizon Fios at the time, so I had, like, for what back then was like a really fast internet. And I was like, this is perfect. by the time that we got ready to sell this show, it was spring 2018. And even then, there were really only 5 places that we could go to. We went to Netflix, we went to Hulu, we went to Amazon, we went to Apple, which hadn't even come out yet, but they were starting to hear pitches, or maybe starting to produce, can't remember. And then there was CBS All Access, now Paramount Plus. But all these other places did not exist, really only had the 5 outlets. In the end, we sold this Netflix, obviously. But it needed to be that, right? It needed to be one of these places that could do batch release. Otherwise, couldn't do the concept of the show.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. You started in 2018, and it's coming out into this year.
Yeah.
How does that whole period look for you? Do you start like once you actually you've had the general idea? I'm guessing you pitch it. They say, okay, let's start doing it. And you were working with Scott Free, I believe, right?
Yeah. So basically, starting in, I think it was 2016 when we started to develop it. So it was me, my partner, Fred Berger, who is at a company called Automatic, who I've done a bunch of other stuff with. We did Autopsy Jane Doe together. We did a movie called Strange But True together, and I've known Fred for 15 years. And a guy named Justin Levy, who runs his television department, who I've also done other projects with and known forever. And then we hooked up with Scott Free. So I've known, I Ridley directed Matchstick Men. And so, and then the people who run his TV company, David Zucker, Jordan Sheehan, and Craig Kruger, I've known forever. I met Jordan when she was Ridley's assistant on Matchstick Men, however many years ago that was. Wow. Now she runs his TV department. And so we all got together and I said, yeah, here's the thing I want to do. And it took a little time to develop it. By the time we went into the studios, I had a really developed pitch to the point where what I had is I had cards, I had colored cards, and I went into the executives and I laid them out on the table and I said, pick a color. I told them the basic concept of the show. They said, and so then I pitched them a 2-minute version. I said, here's the yellow episode, pick a color. And they said blue. And I pitched them the blue episode. So I basically played the game for an hour and let them watch the season. And fortunately, they kept going, that worked. You're like, oh, that worked for me. Like, did you rig it? And I was like, no. And then I went, shit, I could have rigged it, but I didn't need to rig it. Like it worked. And so we sold it to Netflix. So that was spring of 2018. And then what they wanted me to do was write 2 of the episodes and do a Bible where they could really see everything just fully laid out, characters, all the episodes. So I had to re-break everything and I wrote Yellow and Red were the first 2 I wrote. And then that process between the Bible and the writing and the revising and the blah, 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 was from sort of late summer until spring of 2019. And then we got a green light for the show, at which point I was able to hire my writer's room. And then the writer's room from like the late summer of 2019 until the end of the year. And we broke everything back down again. I was like, all right, here, everybody's coming in. The funny thing about that was, so I'm doing all the hiring for the writers and I got to read Yellow and Red. And you haven't seen Red yet, but there's a bit in Red where there are these bees. There's bees everywhere. And you don't really know why there's bees. If you're reading Red first, if you're watching Red first, even if you're not watching it first, you do not know why there are bees. And everybody reading it was like, what's the deal with the bees? And I said, well, I will tell you once you come in. If you work for me, I'll tell you. So I hire everybody. We get to the writer's room and there's 10 of us in the room. And I said, all right, first question, everybody wanted to know, what's the deal with the bees? And the answer is, I have no idea. I have no clue. I just put bees in because I thought it was cool. And so I'm like, well, we're going to figure it out together what the deal is with the bees. And we did. And it's fun. It's a little silly, but it entertains me. And so it was a lot of that. It was a lot of going like, all right, we know we need to do this thing. We know we need to throw out a lot of the rules. How do we structurally do something that theoretically shouldn't be able to be done? And how do we make rules, live by those rules, and when do we bend them? And so we did a lot of that, and we were in the writer's room for 4 months, 5 months, 20 weeks, basically. And then I went out to New York to make the show, and that was at the end of January 2020. We had a month and a half of prep, and then it was March 17th, 2020, and we all know what happened, and everything shut down. And so cycled back to, I live in California, went took my family out to New York. We came back to California and hunkered down for the rest of the year while I made like tweaks to the scripts and things like that. And then the show got re-greenlit in January of 2021. Went back out to New York in March of 2021 with my family. And we started shooting in September of 2021, finished shooting in April of 2022. Then we did post up through essentially October of 2022. And then Netflix took it and started doing the thing where they put all the subtitles and start marketing, and it was released in January.
Yeah,
so
very cool.
It's all like, I mean, if you look at it from concept to release, yeah, it's 8 years, something like that.
Well,
Yeah,
a long time.
It is, and yet it's like, it's not. Most of a lot of stuff, it just takes forever. The fastest ever was Matchstick Men. I had the idea, I wrote the book, I got the book to my agent. He happened to have, it was Endeavor at the time. There was another agent there who represented, my brain's not connecting. This is really sad. I cannot remember the guys who wrote it. He wrote fucking Ocean's 11. This is what happens when you turn 50.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm not even going to try to remember who wrote Ocean's 11.
Well, he also wrote my movie. So Ted and Nick Griffin, who did the adaptation. And then pretty quickly, Zemeckis was on, and then Ridley was on, and then suddenly they were making the movie. I mean, this was within the period of like a year and a half, which is, and I thought that was sort of normal. I was quite young at the time, and I didn't know. Now I know, no, it takes forever. Forever.
That's a movie I've always wanted to go back and revisit. So I remember liking it quite a bit when I saw it. I don't think I saw it in the theater.
Yeah. They did
it was
with it. Yeah. I mean, I can say that my only involvement in the film was a couple conversations with Ridley, and I mean, I'd see him on set or whatever, but like in terms of development, Ridley and Robert Zemeckis and Jack Rapke, his partner. And then mostly I would go to set on like, I think it was Wednesdays, because that was when Ridley had Lobster Day. And so I would like show up, I'd get to hang out for a bit, I'd have Lobster Day, and then I get bored because I find film sets relatively boring, especially if I have nothing to do. And then I go home. It was lovely. And so I can say, like, I think Ridley and Ted and Nick Griffin did a really great job with it. Even though really, I mean, I wrote the book and the story, but that's it. But you know, I'm proud of it, what they did.
Yeah, it was one of those really interesting left turns for Ridley. I thought it was, you know, he does have a lot of left turns. If you'll look, he has the big, you know, the big bombastic films, and then he'll do stuff like Matchstick Men or The Counselor, and it's like, those are interesting turns.
I mean, even in the beginning, you know, he goes from something like Alien, and then he goes and does Thelma and Louise, right? He does feminist two-person manifesto thing. Meanwhile, he's 80 something, and he has more energy than I will ever have. Him, the same way. GC is 60 something. He's 13 or 14 years older than me. The man does not stop. Giancarlo he's also the loveliest human being in the entire world. But he every weekend he's at a convention. You know, he's in a ton of different shows, and he was #1 on the call sheet for us and did not flag at all. Like he just, and he was great for the other actors. My whole cast was amazing, and it was just kind of a joy to have him leading it, you know.
Well, that's a good segue, actually, because Giancarlo's been a favorite of mine since the late 80s when I first saw him in Spike Lee's films. And you know, he's been in so many other things that he's kind of been around. He was in you know, you forget that he's in the Usual Suspects. There's another, he was in King of New York, which is a really cool movie with Abel Ferrara.
I love King of New York. I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool people in King of New York, actually. Wesley Snipes is in King of New York.
That I knew. I think I just recently had that conversation for some reason. But he was in, it's funny because Giancarlo, I was a big fan of Do the Right Thing. So obviously I knew him as Bugging Out Forever, right? And for whatever reason, my wife and I in the 90s, we were not married in the 90s, but we were dating, became obsessed with this Tim Robbins movie called Bob Roberts. And like, I don't know if you've ever seen it. Yeah. So it's Tim Robbins and Jack Black in one of his earliest roles.
Right.
Gore Vidal and Giancarlo. And Giancarlo plays this sort of
The reporter.
yeah, like
The
this super
fringe
far left
reporter.
reporter against the far right Bob. And I was like, I think that's bugging out. Is that bugging out? It's bugging out. And we watched it so often. Did you have a cat? Was that a cat?
No, it was a dog.
A dog. What kind of dog? Sorry, I'm
Chihuahua poodle.
I have 4, and I have 3 Chihuahua mixes and a Havanese poodle mix. So there we
That's
go.
nice. That's cool. Yeah, she's 16 years old. I got her in the divorce.
Baby.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, dog obsessed.
No, that's okay.
You get very dog distracted.
Yeah, that's a same thing.
Okay, wait. So Giancarlo, yeah, no. The point being, he's kind of amazing in everything, and he has and you could see it obviously by the time the world really woke up to him doing Gus Fring and Breaking Bad, which is where it all kind of like supercharged everything.
Right. He's had a good long career, but he's really Breaking Bad really kind of put him on a different level.
Yeah, I think turned it up, which I think like TV can do in a way that's just harder. I mean, film can do it, don't get me wrong. But I think, you fall in love with a character, especially one that goes for so many years, and especially one that's this weird sort of anti-hero, because Walter White's the anti-hero, right? Walter White is like, when you look at it, you're like, Walter's not a good dude, but you're on his side.
Right.
And Gus Fring, you're like, oh no, he's against my hero, but you go, well, he's got his rationales, and he just played the humanity in it so incredibly well.
Yeah.
And I just think which is why when the chance came to work with him for something like this, for Leo, and I'm like, listen, I need a guy who is, without a doubt, a criminal. He is a criminal. He does wrong things. When you look at it, at the end of the day, he uses a lot of people to get to the ends that he believes he needs to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to understand who he is. You have to see, if you've seen Violet, he was a family man who lost something very important to him.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to believe that. So it was a very easy thing when it turned out he was available, which, was shocking to me at the time. But it just happened to be that we had this gap when he wasn't shooting Better Call Saul. And we got super lucky. And I think really fell into something great there.
Yeah, he's just amazing, and I love seeing him, in a role like this, because he's played Gus Fring now for a long time, and it's nice to kind of see him shake that off and do something else. Quite frankly,
yeah,
it was great to have him come back on Better Call Saul. In fact, this whole stuff, the stuff with Fring and all that stuff that happened before Breaking Bad was always my favorite part of everything on Better Call Saul. Was my favorite thing, except for Saul. For some reason, Saul was the least interesting part of his own show. I don't know. Nothing against Bob. Bob's terrific. It's just that, that everybody else was just always far more, even especially Reyes Sehorn on there, I thought was really good. Yeah.
Well, because I think to some degree, obviously, where Saul's a fascinating character on Breaking Bad, right? So to some degree, it's a little bit. It's and by the way, I happen to I like all aspects of Better Call Saul, but there's this great Patton Oswalt bit where he's talking about if he went back and met George Lucas when George was doing the first prequels. And Lucas was like, "Yeah, we're gonna see Darth Vader, but he's a kid."
Yeah.
And Patton's like, "Yeah, but I don't want to see the things that I love when they're kids. I want to see them now." And so there might be a certain amount of that where you're like, I like Saul as Saul. I don't need to see him wrestling with the.
Yeah, Saul was always kind of I rewatched Breaking Bad after watching Saul, and Saul was far more annoying on Breaking Bad. He was a little bit more real on his own show. I get that. It's just he was still, for me, the least interesting. Not the least interesting, one of the least interesting parts.
I still haven't seen the final season yet because I was in the middle of doing the show. So I need to watch the final season of Better Call Saul, and I've been waiting until I have. But I know Giancarlo directed one of the episodes too, and it was very well received. And he's directed a bunch of stuff, and even just on set, like the man just knows what it's very clear. He's been doing this in life.
Well, he's a professional. Yeah.
He's a professional. I mean, he's a theater guy too. He's in the original freaking cast of Sondheim of Merrily We Roll Along, which is crazy to me. And I had him sing opera to me on one set one time. He's anyway. So that's
really cool.
I'm still now that I've become close with him, obviously even more of a fan than I was, but I started as an unabashed fan. I remain an unabashed fan.
Yeah. Yeah, he's somebody I would love to talk. There's such a big list of people I would love to talk to that doesn't it's like I keep trying for certain people. It's like, and
Yeah.
either don't hear anything or they're like, no, he's busy. Like, okay, I understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about directing. The writers and the directors of this season have done a lot of different things, but I was really kind of I got really, again, going back to the 80s, I got really perked up when I saw Robert Townsend's name
Yeah.
pop up.
Yeah.
And it was like so cool to see him, see that he's still, he's still directing and things like that. And I know Hollywood Shuffle is supposed to be coming to Criterion at some point, or
Oh, as well as it deserves to be. Yeah, I
yeah.
was a Hollywood Shuffle fan also back in the day when I was a kid, and Five Heartbeats, and
Yeah.
I watched it do stand up because I was kind of a stand up nerd as well.
Okay.
Yeah, he still has a ton of energy. Also, like GC, like he's one of these guys, and he's got to be 60. I'm not sure actually. I shouldn't say whatever Robert. I'm sure Robert can speak to his own age, but he's older than me, and again, still has a ton of energy on set. Oh my gosh, so much energy on set. Like he's just keeps everybody pumped, which was good. He came in. We did Violet and Green at the end. Those were our last 2 blocks that we shot, and it was a long shoot. It was a really long shoot and a difficult shoot, and we were all. It was during COVID. Well, we're still during COVID, but it's all the COVID protocols. So you're in a mask for 12, 14 hours a day and a shield sometimes, and just long, hard hours for everybody. And I think because he had so much energy and because he just kind of has this way about him, it kept everybody kind of peppy and going.
Yeah.
And like the Green episode, we were in this prison for weeks. This prison in Staten Island called Arthur Kills, where they shot some of Orange is the New Black and a bunch of other. If you've seen prison stuff on TV, you've probably seen the inside of every place of this thing. They shut it down years ago, and this guy bought it and uses it, rents it out to film companies because people are always needing prison stuff because there's bad in the world. And so it's not exactly, we were doing this in February, March. So it's dreary. The sun is still gone. This is, Staten Island. It's snowing, and you're in a prison. So lots of opportunities to just get really down and low and depressed. But I think because Robert is just a very energetic, kind of cheery dude, it just, infected stuff in a good way. Good infection.
Yeah. Good infection.
There's a scene in you saw Green, so the mushroom scene. Like those are background actors, and he and Giancarlo actually together like took them through these warm-ups and gave them these like this motivational speech, which I have some of it on tape actually, and had them all by the time they were done believing they were Brando. Like every single one of these background actors who are often just, random people. They're not even necessarily actors.
Yeah.
And we spent a day shooting that very silly scene. And it works, I think, because he got them to this point where they were just super in it,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was one thing in the prison. So I gotta ask, the kitchen in the prison had some things that I don't think you would normally see in a prison.
You surprised? What?
Well, for me, it's just I have a vision of, oatmeal, powdered eggs, that sort of thing. But I saw all these different, not the mushrooms that went into the oatmeal, but I saw all these different mushrooms. I'm like, wait, is this the menu? I mean, what the hell's going on? He's making carrot, like orange carrot soup or whatever the hell he was making. And I'm like, what?
That is very much to some degree. Certainly it depends on the level of prison. There are actually like super low max prisons where they will actually do things like that.
Right, I can the fed, what is it, what do they call it?
Club fed stuff.
Fed, yeah.
Yes, of course. No, that is very much sort of poetic license for Stan, who the gourmand. I thought you were going to say like, well, they wouldn't have necessarily the knives, they wouldn't have the things, but it is amazing what they will give trusted.
Right. No, that I understand, because I mean they have all sorts of things that, but they also have people kind of paying close attention to what you're doing with
Yeah,
those
yeah.
things.
We had a couple prison guards who we talked to in the writers' room when we were doing the Green episode, and we kind of just got a sense of, how do things work, how do things work with jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, but the dangerous things they actually can have. Mushrooms probably not, but
Because there were some nice looking mushrooms in the background.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I
And
mean, they looked like they belonged in a tasting menu somewhere.
most of those mushrooms I got to take home and cook for my family.
Oh, nice.
They were grown. A lot of them were grown for us by these mushroom growers somewhere, and they came from the props department. So Max Sherwood, who did our props, and his people, they did that, and then we had a bunch of mushrooms that they made on any like the food that we had on set at some point got cooked, and people just got to eat it because you don't want to waste it.
Right.
And I like mushrooms. I was like, whatever we don't use, can I take home? And they said, sure. So that's what we did.
Perks of being the head guy.
Yeah. No, it's I'll take whatever. I'm at the end of the show, the end, and then you could buy some of the furniture and the stuff from the show, because there's only so much that Netflix can keep. They have so many shows, they can't keep everything in warehouses. They don't need it. So I'm actually sitting here right now as we talk at Roger's desk. That's in his house. And I bought this, and I bought the chair I'm looking at the chair from Hannah's apartment. I was very excited because I really
very cool.
Yeah, no, just fun.
So this was your first time running the show, running a show, right?
No, so it was actually my second, but I don't blame you for not knowing that, because you can't find the first one, which kills me. So the very first show I ever ran was a low budget thing for a company called Fullscreen, which was a video on demand, like streaming service that does not exist anymore. And it came off of AT&T and worked with DirecTV. So I had a show called Cassandra French's Finishing School, which was based on my novels.
Yeah, I saw that in there, but I thought that was for MTV or something.
So I did the pilot for MTV. I did do a pilot for MTV, but it didn't go. So that got shot. And it was a fun pilot, but then a couple years later, figured out how to do it as a half hour. And I did it with this company, Fullscreen. And we produced 8 episodes, and it's great. And it's one of these things I'm really proud of. It's very fun. It's very funny. It's pretty faithful to my book. It was the first time I really ran a show top to bottom. So I learned a lot of the ropes, which was good. And then it came out on Fullscreen. It came out on DirecTV. It was on DirecTV's Channel 101 or whatever they call it now. So people in the world got to see it, but then Fullscreen, like 8 months later, completely shuttered. And as a result, when something streaming shutters and there's no place to show it, there's no DVDs of it, right? There's no ancillary to that anymore. So you can't find it. Doing the sort of forensic analysis, we think that the rights that the show itself might now rest within the HBO Max juggernaut. But we don't have any proof of that yet. I've got people looking into it. Plus, HBO Max is in the process right now of taking things off of their platform. Right. But gosh, I wish, even if just for my actors who are fantastic. Yeah, I mean, Jess Renee Russell plays Cassandra. Brooke Markham, who was on that CW show, The Blind Poop. She was on it. Caleb Worthy, who's on Reboot right now, and been in a ton of stuff. He's the main guy. Kai and Kim. There's just a lot of really great actors in it. But anyway, point being, that is where I first learned kind of the ropes in terms of how to do this job. And then this was either, the next step up, just because it's a much bigger show, much bigger show. And so a certain amount of that was learning on the job.
Well, that's cool. I mean, it's cool that you had that. It's a shame that you don't really know where the hell it actually is right now.
Like I have DVDs that I Personally have that have like a time code on them or whatever. It's the only way to watch it right now, I think. But so it goes. This is, if you want to watch Infinity Train right now, just to choose something from the HBO library that I liked, which is a really great, smart animated show, you can't. You just cannot. It was on HBO Max. It was on Cartoon Network, I think. Anyway, but they took it off in order to do their write down, and now it's gone. Westworld is being picked up by somebody, but Westworld, for the love of God, same thing. We don't own anything anymore. We all kind of stream and rent.
Yeah, I thought that was an odd the actual HBO show, I thought doing that was an odd move myself, but they
It's just,
they're doing what they need to do. I mean,
yeah.
whatever, it's not my business, that's for sure.
I'm the exact same. I feel the exact same way. I don't know how that works. They need to keep it as a going concern. I get it. And then you go as an artist, that you're like, shit, that sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, but we also come from a world where we expect everything immediately. When I was growing up, if I'm watching something, it's 82, and
Right.
that episode of Cheers, unless unless I happen to catch it on a rerun, I'm never going to see that episode again.
Or unless you happen to have a VCR and you had,
it's
see,
like,
then you had to depend on if you weren't going to be there. Like for me, when I was a teenager in the 80s, you had to depend on whoever was in the house to actually watch the damn show too.
Yes, that's
right. And it's like, well, that so often, ended in failure.
And then if you had it not to tape something over it, they're like, oh, I needed to tape whatever.
Right.
Oh, man. So I think we just expect that everything is going to always be there. And I think now at least realizing that's not the case. But whatever, it is what it is right now. The show's out right now. Kaleidoscope's out right now. Hopefully it remains on Netflix. Netflix doesn't keep shows away. People can watch it in a year or 2 years. But we take it where we can get it.
Yeah. And I went ahead and put I put my rating on there for Love This on it myself, because I'm sure that any little bit like that helps.
Oh gosh, who knows? I mean, we've been fortunate that the show kind of hit and a lot of people watched it, which is great, or still are watching it. End of the day, I just want people to, hopefully watch and enjoy in the way they're going to watch and enjoy.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I have no idea if we do a second season. I don't.
Well, you would mention something about the fact that it wouldn't necessarily have anything to do with these characters, but you could do the same sort of thing with a whole different thing, and that idea appeals to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would not, even though I love these characters and I love my actors, and maybe I would find a way to, if we could figure out everybody's schedules, which good luck to us, keep the same actors in an American Horror Story kind of way, right? And do different story entirely. But I'd also want to find some way to amp up and change the way we do the structure. I wouldn't want to do the same thing again. We did it. And I'm really happy with it. So I also just get bored super easily, which is amazing because this took years and years and years, but there were so many parts of the process. Okay. But I wouldn't want to do the same challenge. I have other challenges that I'm interested in terms of storytelling. So if we could find a way to do it and to up the game, then I think it'd be worth it,
Yeah. So I two questions came up when you were just talking about all this stuff, and one was, what have you heard back from Netflix about the show in terms of, I don't know, their favorability towards it, or their approval, or numbers, or anything like that? I mean, you hear oftentimes this is now the most watched thing on Netflix ever, or sometimes those things come through, and sometimes you hear all episodes around and then they cancel the series. It's like
So I'm not expressly not allowed to talk about numbers, which is
okay. That's fine.
They are a bit of a black box. If anybody wants to go and Google things, you can go, and there are a couple, as they call them, consumer-facing data points, that are out there that you can find out. So like we were, in the top 5, top 1 or top 5 or top 10 with X numbers of countries. I think for the first week we were out, we were in the top 10 and all 90 countries that Netflix services, and most of them were somewhere in 1, 2, or 3. So that's just stuff that's out there on the internet. So I imagine as we go on, we'll be allowed to say, sometimes they release stuff, right? They'll say exactly like you just said, this got 1 billion hours of watching or whatever.
Right.
You know, I know we have a couple 100 million hours of watching. That's out there. That's not me saying anything I'm not supposed to say. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the good thing is everybody's happy that it struck a chord, and that there's, you know, people out there talking about it, and everybody argues about what's the best order to watch it, and if you watch it in this order, it's that, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And so I, you know, for my purposes, that's good. I have no idea at the end of the day, truly, from the Netflix side, whether we would even get a second season. But there was never really a plan for a second season. There was sort of a concept that
So yeah, you just haven't heard back from, hey, we want to do this, like, yeah. And if you want any of this stuff, if you want me to cut any of this stuff out, that's fine.
I mean, let's just say there are continuing conversations.
Gotcha.
There are continuing conversations. But I think, by the way, I'm happy to say that I think it has to be a match from both sides. I think it has to be a thing that they want. And look, you can look at the show, right? I'm not giving budget numbers, but we're not an inexpensive series. We shot in New York. It's action. I mean, that's not cheap to make. And so they have to want it from their end and go like, okay, whatever we green light has to be worth it to us. Totally fair. And I have to want it from my end. I have to make sure that the show I want to make and the show that they would want from me would be the show that I think would be interesting to do again. You know, we only have, look, I'm not Ryan Murphy. I will never be Ryan Murphy. I don't think I could do 10 shows at once. It's just not in my DNA. I get very specifically into one thing, and that's the thing I want to do if I'm producing it. And so I only have so many shows in me. And, you know, I want to make sure whatever I'm doing is really exciting to me. And it could be into a Kaleidoscope. Like, if we figure out a way to do it, that could be awesome, especially if there was a way to work with my team again, because they're fantastic. You know, top to bottom, they're just fun.
Yeah, so I totally get what you're saying. Well, what is there anything you're kind of trying to work on now? Are you working on a new novel, or are you working on a screenplay or something like that?
I have a show on Amazon that I'm waiting for, that we had the writer's room on, and I'm waiting for the green light on that. So we'll see if that goes any moment. They're all interesting places. And so in the middle of doing that, I'm a theater person to some degree. I'm a huge musical theater fan. And I have one project, a friend of mine and I, who's a composer, we're doing a musical theater adaptation of The Bad News Bears, the movie from the 1970s.
Interesting.
Which is a favorite. And we've been on that for, gosh, a long time. If you think TV takes a while, theater, oh my God. And then, I mean, there's always film and TV projects that I have to do a lot of spinning plates, even though I'm, you know, producing one thing at a time for the most part, developing a bunch at once, just because you don't know what's going to go, right? Things different. I mean, this Amazon thing I think I started writing it for them while we were shooting Kaleidoscope, and then we had an actor attach at the beginning, like right around when we were finishing shooting Kaleidoscope, and then we had the room this last summer and fall, and so now we're just kind of waiting. We have a director attached and blah blah blah. And so things just, you know, you spin the plate over here, and then you go and you deal with this plate over here, and then wait, this plate's falling, I got to go deal with this plate over here. So that's just how you have to, at least for me, that's how I have to live my life. I haven't written a book in like 10 years. I love it. I wish I could. Books, for whatever reason, are the one thing that I need just time. I just need X number of months to just sit down and do nothing else, because as soon as I do something else, I get out of my head, and it happens. And so as a result, because I've been doing just a lot of film and TV, I haven't really had time to do it. I have a thing I want to do, but I need time. So maybe, I don't know. We'll see what happens. If there's a writer strike, maybe I'll have a few months. You know, we'll see what happens in May.
Well, let's hope. I mean, I certainly hope that doesn't happen, but certainly would be cool to get another book. You know,
I know it's the pros and cons. Nobody wants a strike if one becomes necessary. If we, you know, we're in a place now as writers where we're in a place now in the industry now where it's really weird right now, and nobody feels like they're particularly valued. And I think writers especially, we feel like we've been put into this place where we are pieces and pawns and very, well, all right, it's a cog. We can take out that cog there and put in another cog. And it's become very hard for working writers to be working writers. And I think everybody feels like there needs to be some sort of change. And I think the streamers and the networks are feeling like, well, we still are having trouble ourselves. And so there's this loggerheads that's coming out, and I don't know who blinks. So hopefully it gets figured out. That's above my pay grade. We've got really good people in the writers union who negotiate those things. So
yeah,
we'll see,
Yeah, I've always, I've been writing since I was a kid, and as a kid, as a teenager, I always wanted to write a screenplay, and I kind of half-assed a bunch of them at one point. Then I met somebody, and I've probably told the story too many times in the show, but he encouraged me to write something, and it took me a number of years, but I put the end on something the last day of last year.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Awesome. So, and then now I'm trying to just think of, I've got a couple I got like a half dozen ideas that I'm trying to work on, but I'm trying to work on one thing in particular. I'm trying to write 2 this year. That's my goal.
I think that's awesome. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it is, right? It's just it's the whole writer writes thing.
Yeah.
And once you get one down, once you get the one, you go like, oh, okay, great. I got this. I can do this. And then you get the other one and the other. And the great thing about it is, and I use this in comparison to acting, which is obviously its own special talent and skill, which I did as a kid and then said, because you never have to be given permission to write. You can always go, we get off this call, you can go write, I can go write, we can go do whatever we want. We can go about the business of doing it. Whereas something like acting, to some degree directing, although you can always pick up a camcorder, I guess, or your phone, you have to be given permission. Whereas the stuff you create can go and have a life. You can take that script that you wrote, send it to people, they can send it to people. All of a sudden it's off doing things. The best case scenario is when, I have a treatment I wrote like 10 years ago, I think. And then because I have this producer who is on it, all of a sudden I got this call 2 weeks ago that there's this actor who read it and wants to attach himself to it. And I haven't thought about it in 10 years, but it was out, it was living its own life like a baby bird you have pushed out of the nest. And here it comes flying back to you. So that's the great thing. Once you've done the one, you're going to do 2 more. Like you just get that stuff working for you. I think
that's my hope. I've taken too long in getting to this point, but so we're about the same age, so it's like, I know I've got less years ahead of me than I do behind me. So it's like
there is no time limit though. Like it is, that's what's great about it, is it doesn't really matter at the end.
Right.
No.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, it's kind of like a final question. What is kind of it? I mean, are you kind of you're waiting on a lot of things, obviously. What are you doing? What are you watching, reading, or whatever this month? Especially because January is, it takes a while after the holidays for things to start picking back up again and everybody getting back to work.
100%. Well, everybody, that's so Hollywood, right? It's honestly, it's like everything shuts down the middle of November, because what happens is everybody goes, well, Thanksgiving's coming up, and you go like, okay, and they go, well, but after Thanksgiving is sort of pre-holidays, nobody's doing anything and nobody's buying anything, whatever. So like, wait till the holidays. Then the holidays are over, it's January 7th or whatever, and everybody's like, well, now there's Sundance, and like everybody I know is at Sundance right now. So
Sundance this year sounds really cool, actually.
There's been a lot of big stuff. There's a lot of good stuff from what I understand. So it's great. People go to Sundance. I don't go to Sundance. It's too cold for me.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I'm sure it's great.
Well, you're from Miami too, so.
I'm from Miami. I live in Southern California.
Right.
I went to school in upstate New York for a couple of years, got really freaking cold and moved to California. And then we just lived in New York for a year and a half. And this last winter, like, nearly killed me. I'm such a baby, such a giant baby.
No, me too.
You just get used to certain things, right? So anyway, so everybody comes back from Sundance, and then yes, theoretically, then it kicks off. So yeah, no, I mean, in the meantime, we are waiting on stuff. We're, continuing to have these Kaleidoscope conversations. I'm thinking about this Amazon thing. There's a bunch of other projects like that we wait on. Yeah, and in the meantime, a lot of it is catching up on stuff that people were like, you need to watch XYZ. You will really love XYZ. And I go, love to, but I have zero time because I'm writing a show and in post-production on a show. And so so that's what my wife and I have been doing. So we're catching up on the last season of The Crown just for completist sake. We finally got back into Severance, which everybody's like, you need to finish watching Severance. We watched 1899 on Netflix, even though I know they canceled after one season, which is annoying, because there's so many questions that happen by the end of it. I tend to read either stuff for work where there's, novels and stuff that people kind of give me to look at for adaptation purposes, or just stuff that I just dig. I'm in the middle of reading. I'd read a bunch when I was younger and then picked back up. Do you know The Laundry Files by Charles Stross?
I'm not as literate as I should be. When I was younger, I used to read a lot of fiction, and as an adult, I mostly read nonfiction for some reason. I don't know.
No, it's funny. I never read nonfiction as a kid. And then as an adult, I ended up reading a lot of nonfiction. I think you just get to a point and you're just like, let me read about the world that we're in. It doesn't have to be about, stuff. But this is Charles Stross, just a really great, smart, fits in that sort of Douglas Adams mold where it's like, it's sci-fi / fantasy, but it's also funny.
Okay.
Tend to like that sort of thing. Just fits kind of my temperament. So yeah, I think it's a combo of those things, of just finding things that I like and finding things that, some of them are work related, but whatever kind of keeps me popping and going, and it helps with inspiration. You watch a great TV show or a great movie or whatever it happens to be, and you get inspired to go.
I hear you. That's really cool. Well, like the time I section is up, and I don't want to keep you from anything, but it's really been nice talking to you.
It's fun.
I'm definitely interested whenever, if you want to hit me up, by the time you've got something going on, you want to talk about it.
Awesome.
I'm open. I like letting certain people, like when we talk like this kind of length, it's like I want them to know that I enjoyed it and they're free to pop in if they'd like.
Cool. I dig it. Yeah, no, this is fun. I like just, I like talking to like-minded folks at the end of the day. So it's more of a conversation than anything else.
Yeah. Well, let me wrap up by saying that Kaleidoscope, all 8 episodes of the season, are on Netflix now. And again, they're pretty much all in different order. Just go with it, and then White will always be the final episode.
White last. Other than that, knock yourself out.
Right. And go on and talk about hashtag Kaleidoscope, all that stuff that you kids do nowadays. I feel so old sometimes.
My kids are 22 and 16, right? So they have to clue me in. We blew up on TikTok. Kaleidoscope blew up on TikTok.
Oh, that's cool.
I would have never known. I had no clue. I had to be.
Well, that's actually what you want now, is because that's what propelled Megan to such heights.
Megan, Wednesday. The only thing we did not do is we did not have a TikTok dance in our show, which is our own damn. I should have seen that coming. Whatever I do next, I promise.
There's going to be a dance. Of course, by the time that you put that out, the dance thing is going to be over.
It's going to be gone. It'll be something else. One of them be TikTok. If I knew what it would be, I would do that. That's what I would just do. That would be my
throwing up on leaves or something.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Who knows what is going to capture everyone's imagination? Remember the ice water challenge a few years ago?
Oh Lord, yeah, that's what we do. We float. Everything's just so fast. You just bounce from thing to thing to thing as quickly as possible. So yeah, that's true. Whatever. I'll just throw in every possible weird relation or something in the hopes.
It'll just be a series of random things.
That'll be the whole thing. That'll be the whole show.
I just hope that one of them sticks.
Yeah.
They're like, this is a weird show. It's just all this random crap happening.
It's as legitimate as anything else these days. But yes, I will 100% come say hi at random times, and I'll hit you up.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. Do you have any social media that you're on?
I'm on Instagram. If somebody's really dying to find me on Instagram, what am I? Eric Garcia, the writer.
Eric Garcia, the writer.
Literally just opened it, a month before the show, because I went, I should probably have. And I post back behind the scenes footage and stuff like that. People want to see footage and how we made the show and pictures and stuff. That's a legitimate place to follow.
Yeah. But otherwise, it's probably not really your thing.
It's not as much my thing. I really like talking to people one-on-one. I'm happy to give speeches and things like that too, but like, I'm not a big social media. My family is, I'm pretty private that way. And
Yeah.
that is what it is, but I'm happy to talk about my work. So,
Yeah, that's cool.
if anybody ever emails me or contact or DMs me, I always write back and happy to chat. So.
All right. All right. Well, Eric, thank you very much. Again, Kaleidoscope is on Netflix now. Go check it out, and wishing you the best of luck and hopefully good news coming soon on any of those projects you're working on.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. You have a good night.
All right, you too.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.